I read it in high school, and my memories are pretty limited. I don't think I understood very much, so it's changed considerably since then.
I read it in high school too, and I remember it being a part of the zeitgeist at the time. I remember people talking about it and passing it around, and it being very much a cool thing to read if you identified with the counterculture, which I did.
Did we say that?
I did see that, yeah. 'Cause I remember it was
He
like,
must have said it.
Well, I mean, the funny thing is that I never thought of it I never thought of this as a queer project as we were getting into it. I never thought of Howl as a as a queer poem. It's not a queer poem, but there's a lot of queer stuff in there. But I think I never really noticed how much there was when I was in high school. I think I just blocked it out. But as we got into it and started learning about it and really trying to understand the creative process and what went into making the poem, it really became clear, because Alan articulated it in talking about it, that it was his process of coming to terms with his own sexuality, his homosexuality, that allowed him to free his creative voice.
But all of that is so contextualized in the spectrum of human sexuality. I mean, all his queer imagery is placed in the context of the spectrum of sexuality and human love. So,
but that's even queerer.
I know. Maybe that's what we meant by that was the queerest.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, all that's true, but it's not how, ironically, it's not how we came to the project. It's what we discovered in the making of, but it's not what essentially drew us initially. But just the fact that he was making this proclamation in 1955 was so incredibly courageous and hadn't been done before, so...
But he was talking about so many things. I mean, that was definitely a very striking thing he was talking about, but he was also talking about the way the military was taking over our culture, and how consumerism was taking over our lives, and how advertising was taking over our minds, and all of these things that were just entering the consciousness, and that he really brought into the consciousness in post-war America. It's become so much a part of who we all are now and how we think.
A television show, An American Family. That was a PBS show about the Loud family. It was the first time I saw anything on TV that felt real and believable, and it was something that inspired me to want to be a documentary filmmaker, I believe. And also I can remember a situation comedy with the first African American character called Julia with Diane Carroll. It was the first time I saw a mother and child relationship in a black family, and that to me. So I guess I was just drawn to things on television and in film that were new, that I hadn't seen before, but I knew were truthful.
I was very much taken by Fellini when I was young. I watched a lot of Fellini movies. My father took me to see all the Fellini movies in New York. And there was so much heart in those movies, and there was this amazing, adventurous willingness to just break rules and become imaginative and subjective in ways that I hadn't seen done before. I found that really inspiring.
Well, the film formally and so fluidly worked with animation and live action, and a real character and a dramatized version of that character all coexisting in the same movie, and it did so seamlessly. We aspired to do something similar with this film, even though the filmmaking language was different. but that we could go in and out of these realities in a kind of fluid and seamless way, so the audience just goes along with that journey. Well, the scenes that we dramatize in the movie are based on descriptions by Lawrence Ferlinghetti, the publisher of Howl, who was there that night. And he described for us in a research interview what the room looked like, how many people were there, what the spirit of the room was like, how people were responding. And also Peter Orlovsky, Alan's lover, was there as well, and also gave us some descriptions.
And there are
Kerouac passing the jug of wine. So those are details we have in there, and they're not explained, but they're all embedded in those scenes.
And there are a couple of written descriptions, articles. Kerouac wrote a description, and I think it was in Dharma Bums. It was the first poetry slam. It was the first poetry as performance art. So really, it was the beginning of a movement in performance culture as well as in political and sexual culture.
But there are no photographs. There was no footage, no photographs, no recording, no physical evidence of what went on that night. Well, he captured Alan's humor, that kind of nebbishy, New York, Jewish, earthy humor. James just got it. And that's something that he found completely on his own. I mean, certainly in our rehearsals and in going through the scripts, it wasn't something like we were specifically giving him evidence of, but he found it in the language, he found it in the beats, he found it in the moments, and just culled that from listening to Alan's voice and watching footage.
And the emotional power of his reading. I mean, it wasn't a surprise, but it was very moving and stunning when it came forth in the Sixth Gallery, which is the recreation of that first reading. There was so much feeling and conviction in his reading, and he was so comfortable with the language that he really brought it alive.